All right. Well, gentlemen, we will go ahead and get started. We got a couple more coming in. Most of you have heard this. I did not have a specific outline prepared. There's a couple reasons for that. I'll even tell you why. But there is some paper in the back and pens. If you want to take notes, I see some of you got tablets and other things. That works too. We are, as you can tell, continuing on with our series about tools for the teacher. This is our 5th lesson so far. I will be covering this for Dylan for a little while. I don't know how long, and I don't know how far we're going to get into the material as a result, but we'll do what we can, and if at any point we just get tired of me doing this, we'll figure something else out. But I think this is still very good material. Even if you're not, and this is one thing I wanted to say before we get started, even if you are not going to teach a Bible class per se, the things that we're going to talk about when it comes to the things to think through in your study, in your preparation, all of those things can still go a long way in your personal study. Think about it this way: even if you never step in front of a Bible class, if you put in the preparation and the time and the thought and the effort to really understand what it is that you are reading in the Bible, you're that much better off as a student, even if you never get up and say a word about it. So think about some of these things in that context too. Maybe you're sitting there and you're like, I have no intention of ever getting up and leading a class. Perfectly fine. We've talked about that before too. I still think there is a lot of really good material here to consider and to think about. Before we get too far into it, real quick, are there any prayer requests? Keith has graciously been voluntold to lead our opening prayer. So anything that we need to be praying about, or anybody? Yes, Blue. Dylan, obviously, yeah. Joyce.
Joyce had surgery today and she's out. Looks like she'll be home tomorrow.
Okay. Well, that's good. Yeah, Larry.
My brother's in the hospital. His electrolytes are all out of whack.
Okay.
Another one on the list of his problems.
Bless his heart.
My brother Stan. Yeah. He has got a long, long list of problems.
All right. Anybody else? Okay. Keith, if you would, please.
Well, Holy Father, we thank you for being able to come together at this time to share with our Christian family here and to learn tools that we can take to use for our own personal study and growth, and that we can also use to be able to teach and edify our brothers and sisters in Christ. Father, we have those we want to offer up, be mindful of at this time as Dylan prepares for his upcoming surgery on the 31st. Again, we ask that everything would go well, that his recovery time would be as quick as possible, and that he would be back here with us and serving you. Father, we're thankful for Joyce Pagel's surgery going well. Pray that she will continue to heal and to be back to the best portion of her health at the earliest time possible. Father, also we want to be mindful of Stan and the number of struggles that he goes through, and we pray that he would not become discouraged, that there would be things that doctors can do to alleviate or remove as many of the issues that he has. If it be your Father, and everything, we want to be mindful and thankful of the blessings that you bestow upon us. Let us take this time again and to be focused and to be able to take out of that things that would most benefit each of us in our spiritual walk. We pray these things through your Son's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right. Who remembers what we were talking about last week with the two predominant teaching styles. What were they? Lecture and discussion. That's right. Oh, come on now. So our two predominant teaching styles, lecture and discussion. We're going to get a little bit into some stuff about lecture again. So we'll get to that here in a second. But one of the things that I wanted to cover is just kind of real quick my thoughts here. These are not in the book. If you are using Dylan's book, you're not going to see this. But I think really what it comes down to is a Bible class needs to understand and fit a format based on three elements. One, the material. Two, the environment. Three, the audience. That really just sums it up. If you are getting ready to teach and you are going to just grab onto one of those things and that's how you're going to frame how the entire class is going to go, it may or may not work. For example, if you decide to lecture in a small classroom of about 10 to 12 people over something very practical and discussion based like how to evangelize, that may be ineffective. It depends on who's in the room, but that may not be the best way of doing things. Likewise, if you decide we're going to do a discussion style class out in the auditorium, all of the adults combined over Leviticus, that may not be the most effective way to communicate that material as well. So I think considering all three of those elements, the material, the environment, and the audience, is really important in going into what we need to do in using lecture or in using discussion. It's going to vary based on some of those components. Okay, couple of questions before we get into some more things here. I'm trying to get used to my computer. What did we learn about lecture style teaching? What were some things that we learned about it?
Well, there's no interaction
Okay,
between the teacher and the class.
it's very low interaction.
Students could feel detached from the class.
Students can feel detached. I like that, yes.
Like you said, it allows you to cover a lot of material over a big audience.
Okay, yeah, lots of material for a bigger audience. That works too. Do we remember what were some of the, and some of those go right into this, what were some of the pros, if you will, to lecture style teaching? What were some good things that came about from it?
Less likely to go down rabbit holes.
Less likely to be chasing every single rabbit that comes along. Yeah, sticking more to a script of what you're trying to get through. Anything else?
Your message can be clear. You're able to get a message across.
Okay, clarity of message, which kind of goes with the no rabbit trails, trying to really communicate a specific point or points. What were some things that were cons about the lecture? We've mentioned a few. The low interaction, it's not very good for that. What are some other things that we had talked about?
Get on the topic. You can get
Get off topic? Quite possibly, and especially if you start following down a rabbit trail.
The speaker might not be the world's preeminent expert on the material.
That's a big one.
Get his view.
That's a big one right there, is you are beholden to whatever the teacher has studied and prepared for. And if they are great at it, wonderful. You're going to enjoy it. You're going to learn something. If they are terrible at it, good luck. And it's not, and sometimes it's just the material itself, the preparation, the knowledge. Sometimes it's their communication style, like Dylan's talked about with passion and trying to keep the class engaged. You can get guys up here. I may be one of them. Don't tell me. I'm still in the middle of teaching this. But you can get guys up here that are trying their absolute hardest. The material is good, but it's like listening to cardboard. It's very hard to engage your brain when they're talking. That can happen too. So that was some pros, that's some cons to lecture. What were some of the pros and cons? Let's start with pros to discussion style of teaching. Yep, Blue, feedback. Yeah, you know exactly what's going on because you're hearing it coming from the audience. What else?
I think you can develop a deeper understanding for the individuals in the class. I think it's easier to cultivate that and they can walk away with something that they remember.
Yeah, I like that. You can get into the material and really dig in that discussion and develop the points and make them apply in unique ways to those individuals that are in that room. So definitely one of the things we're going to see just at the surface. Lecture covers a lot. Discussion probably won't. Lecture can get into some very deep theological, textual things. Discussion can get into a lot more deeper, life application things, if you will. There's depth on both sides. What were some of the cons to discussion style teaching, though? Because it can't all be good.
Someone can get carried away in there.
Bingo. That's probably one of the biggest ones right there. Absolutely, Blue. They can get carried away, take the class way off a direction you don't want to go. Timing? Expound on that a little bit.
If everybody's discussion, it may take longer to get through the class.
Okay. I thought that's where you're going with that. Good. Yeah. You're just not gonna be able to cover as much. The deeper the discussion, the more discussion there is. But going back to going off a little bit, that is a real danger in discussion if you as a teacher are not prepared to handle that. We talked about that proactive preparation, how you need to have some of these questions already in your mind before you start that discussion, how you need to have those answers ready to go. You also need to know how to steer it back around. We'll get into some of that a little bit, if not tonight, in a couple of weeks. But you've got to be able to steer it back around from letting that rabbit trail just keep running or saying, okay, I think we've explored that pretty good. Let's maybe talk afterwards because I think we need to get back to this because got to be able to steer it back around. And here's the thing to remember. Our responsibility is to foster learning, to equip, and to build up. We can do that through lecture under the right circumstances. We can do that through discussion in the right circumstances. Neither one is great. Neither one is wrong. It just depends on your circumstance. Okay? But there is probably a reason that lecture shows up more in a Bible class than anything else. These are some of the reasons that are posited. Number one is it's been modeled. If you think about it, you go to school, especially college, what is it usually? Lecture. Let's sit there and tell you the information, write it down, take a test on it. Most of the time, now maybe it's changed, I've been out for a while, but most of the time, college classes are not very discussion based because these people don't, sorry, I'm going off on PhDs here, but a lot of times people with PhDs don't really care what you think because they've worked very hard to get that degree and they want to tell you what they know. So they don't really want to discuss it with you as much as it is just tell you how it goes, all right? That's okay. I have a JD. I know how that goes. I just tell you what the law is. I don't want to discuss it. Kidding. But it's been modeled so heavily, lecture. That tends to be our go-to for what we think learning looks like. Another one that came up was tradition. We've always done it like this. I don't see that as really being one here, but sometimes different congregations that maybe for whatever reason have not had a lot of teachers, they might just kind of stick to this is, Brother Jim did this for 30 years. He always taught lecture. Why are you coming in and doing all this discussion stuff? We don't want to talk. We just want to hear what he has to say. That can actually be a factor. This is a big one, control. We feel, I did this way too fast. We feel whatever. Okay, well, we feel we must guard the truth, and we don't want anything being discussed that could confuse or be wrong. In other words, if I am in control of every word that gets said in this class, it can't be wrong because I will make sure it's not wrong. Yeah, Dwayne.
But what if you are wrong?
Exactly. Yeah, right. Exactly. So it sounds really good in your head that, well, I'll just control the flow of this class. But are you prepared to actually do that? Do you actually know the material that well? Are you that deep into it to where when you say X, Y, and Z, you know and you can back it up day after day, this is what everyone needs to know? I think a lot of it right here also is fear. Fear is a very powerful motivator for all sorts of things. If we are nervous that we're not going to be able to answer questions or comments or control a class, there may be a natural tendency to just lock the thing down. It may not be control over, I want to make sure that the content goes a certain direction. It may be that I don't know how to keep it going a certain direction. So if we just don't talk about it and we lock it down into this little lecture box, then it's never a problem. So fear is a big one. Honestly, I think for me anyway, I'll go ahead and call myself out on this one. I think a lot of the reason we lecture is this. We're trying to get through material. We put in the study. We know how important it is. We want that information in the hands of the students so that they can start using it in their lives, looking at it when they're studying scripture. So let's just shut her down and run through this stuff. We don't need to talk about it. Let's just get through it. I'm probably, Captain, guilty of that more than anybody else, because it's very tempting when you're teaching to think we have to get through the material. And part of the reason we get that kind of in our head sometimes, I think, and you're going to hear a lot of I thinks. Normally in Bible class, that's a bad thing. You don't really want a bunch of I thinks. This is doctrine. I thinks on doctrine, problem. I thinks on opinional things like this, that's okay. But I think a lot of it for me is I see the importance of what it is that we're studying, and I just want my students in a Bible class to see it too. And that can lead to that feeling of, well, we got to get through it then. If I've gotten through point A and B, but C is the one that I want you to take home, I may start rushing through just to get to C, but A and B may be necessary for the class. If there was a little more discussion, I would have seen that people really needed to hear more about point A. They really needed to apply more about point B. And when we got to point C, they already knew it. Yes, Blue.
So you're looking for indicators from your audience, maybe where you can pivot if you have to?
Absolutely. I think I like that. You've got to read the room. You've got to adapt and overcome, right? Gunny Highway would be proud. Adapt and overcome, because that's exactly what we've got to do in teaching. You may start with a lecture and end with a discussion. You may start with a discussion and end with a lecture. You may go back and forth. But as long as the class is flowing and people are learning, they are being built up, they are being equipped, and you are sticking to the scriptures, you may have to do that a little bit. Now, it doesn't need to be chaos. So you don't need to be trying to lecture for 5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes of discussion and done. Now we're back to lecture for 10 minutes, and now we're going to have 2 minutes of discussion. Doesn't need to be chaotic in that way, but look for indicators of, okay, I don't think people are getting this point. Let's talk about it a little more. Or I keep belaboring this point. Everybody seems to get it. Maybe I should move on. So, yeah, go ahead.
If it's the 13th Sunday on your lecture or study, then yeah, you ought to be able to try to cover everything on that day. That's the last day on your quarter.
It sure feels like that, yeah.
But in between there, if you got A and B and didn't get all the C, then I don't see anything wrong with picking it up the next Sunday, finishing that before you started the other one. Instead of feeling like, well, I was rushed through that and didn't learn anything.
No, you're right. And the thing I want you to see, kind of that point at the very end there, understand this, it is okay to get behind your teaching schedule if everyone is still learning. So if you think we're going to cover, and if you were in my Acts class, you know this, I had it in my head, we were going to get through all these chapters, we're going to knock this sucker out, but we didn't. We got into some good discussion. We had some big points that needed to be made. It just didn't happen. It's okay. Now, when is it not? Now, it may not be okay if you've been asked to do a very specific thing, okay? What I'm talking about is just like general going through a book, generally going through a topic, just kind of general Bible class. If you've been tasked with a very specific type of class to be taught because of maybe something going on in the church that really needs to be ferreted out and everybody needs to understand it. Maybe it's the, qualifications for elders and deacons, and we really need to drive this home and get down to it because that's coming up. Okay, that probably requires us to stay a little more on point and not get way off out in the weeds because we're being very precise in what it is that we're trying to do with that time. Likewise, if you are teaching a singing class, it's kind of hard to get behind in a singing class because when you decide to stop halfway through the melody of the song, be like, oh, we'll pick that up next week. Nobody learned anything. You need to maybe go ahead and work through at least the melody. So there's times that classes may require us to be a little more on the nose about we've got to get through this, but not most classes. Most classes are not that way. And I would posit to say this. I think most of the time we need to be encouraging as teachers our students to be looking at this material outside of this classroom. Because if this is the only time they're looking at it, if we're lecturing, they're just getting me. If we're discussion, they're getting everybody else, which may be good. But at the end of the day, are they actually in the word itself? Because if they are coming here just to get it fed to them and they never go in and study any further, it's going to help some, but not nearly as much as if they can get some study in. Okay? So, question for y'all who have taught, if you are like me and you tend to lecture, what do you think it is that drives you to lecture? Is it something we've covered? Is it something we haven't covered? Why would you lecture if that tends to be something you do? If you are willing to admit you do.
Probably the smartest guy in the room.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Uh-huh.
It's easier to do. If you're dealing with material, the easiest thing to do is just talk about it and not vary from that. That's the easiest thing to do. But my thought is, if you ask the appropriate questions, you can maintain your direction without getting lost, and you're still very much close to the lecture. Yeah, anyway, but yeah, in some ways, it's the easiest prepared to do this lecture.
Okay, we're going to get to that. You're already thinking something I'm thinking. Justin, did you have a point?
That was very similar to what I was going to say. I tend to default to a lecture when I feel like the content of what I'm covering is extremely important, and I'm concerned that the other party doesn't, like, for instance, if I'm going over a topic with the kids in school and they are to ask me a question, I may just ramble, right, and lecture at them about that specific topic because one, they don't probably know anything about it at all. Also, I didn't have time to prepare anything. So like Russ said, that it's the easiest one to prepare. You know what you know. You don't know what they know, right? So you can tell them what you know, but if you have time to prepare, then it's easier to do, like, have questions and guide through the questions and find out what they know and what they don't know.
I like that. I think those are good answers for sure.
Good demonstration too.
Yeah. All right. So if you are going to be the lecturer, if you know that you're going to have to adopt a lecture style class, even if it's just for a day, you need to be the type of person that can do certain things. If you can't do these things, lecturing is going to be hard. If you can't hold the attention of the class, might be a problem. If everybody tunes out 3 minutes in, probably not the best style for you. You also have to command the respect of the class to keep it on track. It's not enough to just keep everybody awake. If you ask a question, do you get participation? Do you get challenged on the things you're saying, or do they make good points? And when I say challenged, I mean, like, you're kind of an idiot, let me tell you how it goes, kind of a challenge, not necessarily just questions to keep the discussion flowing, which goes to the third point. You need to know the material inside and out, since you are going to be acting more or less as an authority on it. And you need to manage your time and pace through the material. One of the hardest things in lecture is this. You might not think it, but follow me down this path. If you go and you sit in a Bible class and the lecturer, and it's a lecture style, and they are too fast through the material, they are just like, hey, we've got 13 weeks. Boom, 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 boom. We're going to knock this stuff out. It's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. At some point, you're going to lose the audience, right? Just that's too much information. I can't keep my notes going fast enough. I have no idea what you just said. Way too much. Likewise, if it's too slow, it's like watching paint dry and you lose the audience again. You have to have a reasonable pace that engages the material and the audience at the right tempo. Because if you go too fast, you lose them. If you go too slow, you might lose them. So again, to something that you said, Blue, looking for indicators, paying attention to your class. Like right now, you'll notice my eyes are up here. I'm looking around at all of you guys. I'm not just burying my head down here on my laptop, because I want to see indicators. I want to see head nods and head shakes, and I want to see hands go up for questions, and I want to see eyes are glazing over. Maybe I should move on, right? Like, I can't do that. Yes, thank you, Russ. I can't do that if I'm not even paying attention to y'all. So, got to be able to manage your time and pace, and your best indicator for that is your audience itself. The discusser. If you say, no, lecture, not a great idea, I think we need to do a discussion style class. Fine. But again, if you're going to do this, even for a day, these are some of the things you need to have in your toolbox. Tools for the teacher, right? You need to have these tools in your toolbox to be an effective discusser. Again, you still got to know the material inside and out, because you're now going to have to anticipate those questions that may arise. You ask one question, but what are the 3 questions that come after that potentially? Are you ready for those? You've got to know how to ask good questions to keep the discussion going. There are good questions and bad questions for discussion. You have to know when to use them. It is entirely possible to go through an entire discussion class asking bad questions, and it was absolutely pointless. Nobody learned anything. Oh, but yes, we answered questions, but it really wasn't the best way. We will, I promise, in the coming weeks, talk about asking those questions. What does a good question look like? We'll get into that, I promise. You still need to command the respect of the class to keep it on track and prevent dominance in answers or comments that may happen. You all may have dealt with this, where you were in a Bible class, maybe here, don't say names, maybe somewhere else, also don't say names, where there was that one person who every single time you got up and you started teaching, or someone else started teaching, brother so-and-so or sister so-and-so had to make a comment. And it was almost always not on point, and it was always had to be answered. Because if you just kind of ducked it, and you said, well, okay, I see that, but let's move on to that. No, they were not content until they had gotten it answered in the moment. Maybe you got lucky and ducked that. I didn't. So you have to still be able to command the respect of the class enough to prevent that. If people know they can run over you with questions, you're never going to get through any material because all you'll get is feedback. Now, that sounds like not necessarily a bad thing. Hey, we're getting the discussion going, but if it's going off this way and then this way and then this way, and you're not able to funnel it back and say, guys, I understand all of that, but here's our point. Let's get back to this point, and no one wants to follow you there, it's not going to be effective.
Stuart,
Yes.
and the people that do that usually are saying the same thing every time. That they have a topic that they're
Oh, yeah.
passionate about, and everything pertains to that.
It absolutely. Yeah, even things that don't even tie into it, they'll make the furthest possible tie just to get back to it. Yeah, that can happen. But just like we talked about managing pace with the lecture, you have to manage flow with discussion. It's still kind of the same concept. If you actually stop and you go back to the note, if you were taking notes on the lecturer slide and you take notes on this discusser slide, you're going to find that they actually overlap pretty heavily, okay? You're just doing slightly different things with it, but some of the same characteristics have to be there. You've got to make sure you don't have those rabbit trails. Sometimes it happens, but you don't need so many of them that everybody's getting distracted. If you're chasing every single comment and every single idea, even if it's not on topic, you're going to lose the audience. Too many questions. If every single word out of your mouth is another question, and you just decide, hey, I am Socrates today, and we are doing a full Socratic method, as somebody who went through law school, that's what they do. It's annoying because you just want to hear something every once in a while and just learn something every once in a while and not have to be answering questions for an hour and a half. Same thing. If you're just asking question after question after question after question, people may overload and shut down. You lose your audience. And finally, what if you're not even asking the questions? Guess what? You're saying it's a discussion class, but you're barely asking anything. It sounds like you've gone back to lecture, and people may get bored waiting for the next opportunity to say something and then just kind of tune out. It's like, if I were to have come in tonight and said, we are going to have a detailed discussion class. This is our topic, and we're going to ask questions, and we're going to talk about it, guys. And then for the next 20 minutes, I go on and on and on to set up the intro, and I never ask a question, and then I ask you one, and it's not even a good one. And then I lecture another 10 minutes on the answers that were given. It's hardly a discussion class. So you still, like you with a lecture, having to manage pace, you have to manage flow in a discussion.
Well, do you have to, if you're a discussion, does the teacher necessarily have to ask questions, or is it just an open floor and they expect the students to ask questions?
I would say it's got to be a little bit of guidance. As the teacher, usually you need to give some prompts. Sometimes the prompts will come from the class, but a lot of times you need to steer it to the point you're trying to make. It doesn't do you any good to just say, all right, are there any questions after every single point you're trying to make? Because there may be, and that may be good discussion. But if you're really trying to get people to think about it, you may have to do a little more guidance. That doesn't mean you don't field questions coming from the audience, but you may have to be a little more direct in how you get them there. It may start with one out of the audience, and now you spin it around through some questions into the point you were trying to make. So does that make sense? It's going to vary depending on the situation.
You gotta be the manager.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. If you're trying to make a point and a question comes up, you still got to get around back to that point, even if it's coming out here first or you're starting it first. Yeah, Blue, I see your hand. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's good too. Again, you're the Bible class teacher. You're going to be seen in some form of authority, whether that's justified or not in your case, but you're going to be seen as some form of authority. So help guide again by providing some clarity. Maybe it was a really good question that with one more follow-up gets to that point. Well, do the follow-up question. Don't just let it hang loose in the atmosphere and everybody think, well, what were we supposed to do with that? So this gets to, again, this is not in the book, but Dylan's not here to stop me, so it's going to happen anyway. This leads to what I think is the hybrid approach. and this is getting to what Russ was talking about earlier. I think sometimes the best approach to a class is to adopt a hybrid method, that is, some lecture and some discussion. This method factors in those three elements we talked about: material, environment, and audience. And it gives you the flexibility to move a little bit one way or the other based on how the class is going. If you go in and you say, we're doing discussion only, and you're not getting discussion, or you're not asking good questions, that's not going to really be effective. If you go in and you say, we're doing lecture, and you're not moving through the material at the right pace, and you're not engaging in the right way, that may not be effective. I think with kind of hybridizing the two, we can kind of flex and move a little bit where it needs to. So the example I came up with is dense material and, let's say, Leviticus. If you want to talk about dense material, that one's pretty dense. It may lean lecture, but the small classroom size and the spiritual maturity of the audience may lean toward discussion. So how do you make sense of that? I've got a small group of really mature Christians, but this material is so dense. What do we do with it? Well, under the hybrid approach, you lean a little into the lecture to set up the context. You want to maybe set the framework for what's going on. Then you lean back into discussion to talk about, now, what does that actually look like? Do we see anything in our lives today as Christians under the new covenant that kind of relates to this? Have that little bit of discussion. Then maybe you lean back to maybe you're going a couple of verses at a time, and so you go to the next passage and you kind of set that up a little bit, and then you lean back into, okay, now how does that relate to the New Testament? Do we see any difference between these verses and the verses we just looked at? You're going to be leaning a little bit, is the way I like to say it, during a class. Or it's possible each class may have a little bit more of a style that's dominant. It may be a little more lecture or a little more discussion. But the key is this: not to lean back and forth so much that no one knows what's happening. Again, like I talked about, you can't say 2 minutes of lecture, 3 minutes discussion, 1 minute of lecture, 3 minutes of discussion, 2 minutes of discussion, 3 minutes of lecture. It can't not be frenetic, chaotic nonsense. It's still about control of the material, the environment, and the audience, and making sure everybody is getting a chance to foster their learning, to be equipped, and to be built up. I think the one thing about this is it's probably the hardest of all the methods to master. I think everybody can kind of figure out lecture. It takes a little bit of work sometimes to get the pace down, or to maybe learn how to ask a question in the right time. But for the most part, I think we can all kind of get lecture. Discussion style, I think we can all conceptually get. It's those questions and really how to drive discussion that can probably be the thing that holds us up. It's not necessarily that we don't know how in general. It may be that we don't know the specifics that really make it effective. We'll talk about that coming up very shortly. With the hybrid method, I think it's probably the most effective because you can see what's going on with the class. The lecture's going good, but I think it's time to ask those questions. Let's move into how do we apply this. Let's ask some questions about that. So it can be very effective, but it can also go very haywire, very fast if you're not skilled in both aspects of lecture and discussion. If you're the greatest lecturer in the world, but you have no idea how to lead a discussion class, and you decide, hey, I'm going to try this kind of hybrid way of doing it, you're going to take it way off. It's not going to go well. If you are the greatest at fostering discussion, and every single time you're behind the podium, you're getting the best discussion ever, and you're like, well, I'm going to set it up with some lecture, and you have no idea how to do that well. It's the same thing. It's not going to be as effective. So in some ways, I think this is the hardest to master, but I think it can also be the most effective, again, depending on the material, the environment, and the audience. Remember those three elements, because that's going to drive so much of the format that you are selecting for your class. All right, so before I introduce what we'll start talking about next week, which is really the crux of the discussion stuff, which is driving discussion and everything that goes into that. Because like I said, I think sometimes we don't have the tools necessarily. It's not that we don't understand it. We just don't know what they are specifically. Let me ask you a question or two about this hybrid approach. Number one, have you ever been in Bible classes that seem to look more like this hybrid approach? Okay. I think we've all can say we've been in lecture ones. Maybe we've been in discussion ones, maybe not. But if you've been in this hybrid approach, and Daryl, you put your hand up, so next question to you. Sorry, that's how it goes. Did you like that approach? Did that make sense to you?
So, that's what I was telling Russ, this is actually the way I prefer to teach. When I did the team class, I like to do this, but what I found, the trick was lecturing at the beginning and getting those questions going at the end, and not letting it jump into the middle of your lecture. Not lecture a little bit and doing that, like you said, the 3 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, 2 minute. That was not the way that it worked for me.
And that's good, yeah.
To actually do that lecture a little bit and do it. I like it because at the end of that lecture, if you have that time, it allows for you to do the benefits of the discussion part. And to give people the opportunity to go, this class went right over the top of their head, or, all right, I didn't hit this hard enough, or man, I dwelled on that way too long.
Yeah.
And it lets me learn, go, maybe I need to change my style a little bit, or what I'm teaching the subject, I need to go.
No, that's great. Keith, yeah.
Well, also, again, for course, art teaching here too, I think the teachers have gotten familiar with the level that the class has the ability, or they can read the class to determine, okay, do I need to go into the material, what level or depth that I need to go into the material to, or can we look at this and then move into a discussion or structured questions that are going to reinforce the points or the things that you're looking to make in that lesson. And then you also, with some of the classes that I've experienced where I've taught, you've got your different levels of maturity, but being able to structure questions that are going to allow the more mature people to bring out the points
yeah.
and the topics. And so it's not a lecture, doesn't appear to a lecture thing with me, but an open discussion, and that will, with some of the lesser maturity, can bring up the questions that you go, okay, do we need to allow the people to explore this, or do we want to try and avoid that rabbit hole? But you've got a dynamic in there with this hybrid approach. By if we go into a class where we're not familiar with, going to teach a class at a different congregation, that may be more of a lecture type of format, where I think this lends to having the relationship within the congregation.
No, that's fantastic. And Daryl, to your point too, everybody's going to have their own kind of way of doing this, and there's not necessarily a right or wrong. I mean, there is a wrong way. I mean, let's be honest, but there's not really a best way. A lot of it's going to depend on your class, and a lot of it depends on the material too. So like I said, if you're wanting to go kind of in a verse by verse approach, waiting to the end to discuss might not give everybody an opportunity. But if you're covering like a specific account of something that happened in the Bible, now let's get into that discussion. Then what you described works perfectly for that. So just remember your 3 elements: your material, your environment, and your audience when you're trying to prepare for this. We're almost out of time, but I do want to introduce what we'll start talking about next week, and that is driving discussion. This is, just the reality of things. People like to discuss stuff in Bible classes. They just do. If you don't think that's true, go back and watch the recording of this class. Y'all are awesome. You're discussing stuff, okay? That's good. People want to do that. People have things that they know, that they've studied, that they want to share, that they think is applicable. But a problem can arise in 2 ways when discussion isn't really happening. One is if the teacher isn't fostering the discussion. Now, they may have a good reason, such as the material or the environment again, but if they're not fostering discussion, people aren't getting the opportunity to say something. The other problem is, even though people may like to talk in Bible class, if they don't actually participate when they're given the chance to do so, that can slow down that discussion to a dead stop, which kills the whole point of a discussion-based class. Now, I want us to note, though, this should not preclude us from offering them the opportunity. All right? We talked a little bit briefly about silence. We'll get into that some more too. Silence isn't always a bad thing. The opportunity matters more than necessarily, moving it at a certain pace sometimes when you're dealing with discussion. So next week we will pick up here. We'll rehash this real quick. We'll get into some things about driving discussion and the two types of discussion. Just for sake of time, we'll go ahead and wrap it up, but I appreciate everybody's comments. And we will keep going with this next week. Thank you for